Hello, everyone. Welcome to Elevate Your Business, the show where we dive deep into the world of business success, along with the tactics and best practices used to get there. I am your host, Ed Jarecki. Thank you for joining us today. Throughout this show, we aim to empower business owners and entrepreneurs like yourselves by providing invaluable lessons and advice from successful individuals who've traversed similar paths of business ownership and leadership. Our guest today, no exception. So sit back, relax, and let's give a warm welcome to our incredible guest speaker today, Frederic Abramson. Frederic is the founder of Golden Thread Technology. He is an accomplished business owner whose work revolves around using genetic data combined with other data to identify the risk of injury to an athlete, particularly children. Frederic's science work includes human genetics, mathematical biology, computer software, and biotechnology. Years ago, Frederic wrote artificial intelligence software to solve complex health problems. His analysis of 600,000 pregnancy outcomes for his PhD thesis was the first big data study in healthcare where his software pinpointed hospital infection sources. As Frederic joins us on the show, he will shed light on what success means to him personally and how his definition has evolved over time, as well as a few of his challenges he's encountered and some valuable lessons learned from each experience. Finally, for today, we'll explore how Frederic has harnessed innovation in his business to break through barriers and achieve incredible results. So join me in welcoming Frederic Abramson as we embark on a captivating episode of Elevate Your Business. And without further ado, welcome to the show, Frederic. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the introduction, and happy to be here. And I hope that your viewers and listeners find our mutual exchange beneficial in their thinking and helpful in so many ways.
Well, thank you. To start, I know I shared a few things. Share a little bit more about your background and your work.
Well, I tell people my background is, in many respects, the strangest of any breathing person in North America, because I've done a lot of different things. And I think that overall, the fact that I've done those things contribute to how I view what we do and what I do, and the issues around success and learning and innovation. But my earliest job, besides working in a record distributor when I was in high school, was in the rock and roll field when I used to produce records and put on rock and roll shows in Philly and New York. So I knew Sam Cooke and Jerry Lee Lewis, the Monotones, the Story Sisters, Frankie Avalon, all those oldies but goodies. And it was a great experience because I learned something that took me, I didn't realize I learned it until later on in life when somebody asked me, what did you learn in the music business? And I said, what I learned was, I don't care what you tell me you can do. I put you on stage and I watch the audience. And if they're moving, I know we're okay. And if they're not, we're screwed.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, but that's a very empirical way of viewing the world.
Yeah.
What do you do? What impact does it have? And is it moving in the direction you want your target audience to move? And so, but I left the music business and went back to college and majored in mathematical biology and English, which is a very strange combination. But there's another lesson there, Ed, for people, because a lot of people, and you know this, encounter frustrations and failures and things in their early life where things aren't going the way they would like it to go. And many people give up. And so one of the things I will share is about, for whatever reason, my brain never gives up in the sense to just abandon things. Now, it's easy to say, but consider this. When I was an undergraduate at Penn, I failed 6 of my first 10 classes. So the university told me to take a year off and grow up. I came back and they put me on probation because that's the rule. When you return from a leave, you have to be on probation. You're allowed 2 semesters on probation, but I was on for 7 semesters. Now, how does that work? Every time my case came up, they said, well, he got an F in that, or they found some reason to continue me. But when it came time for me to graduate, I wanted to go to graduate school. And the head of the biology department said, "Why do you want to go to graduate school?" I said, "I don't want to go to Vietnam." He said, "That's a good reason. We're, we're going to recommend you." And I got recommendations from the biology department at Penn. Now, my undergraduate GPA, including my failures, is 1.65 out of 4.
Wow.
This is, I think, the lowest in the history of the university, started by Benjamin Franklin, just to give you a flavor. But I applied to 4 graduate schools: Penn State, Maryland, those were my safety valves, and Rochester and Stanford. Well, Rochester and Stanford took me, Penn State and Maryland turned me down. Now, Ed, you have to ask yourself, and everybody listening, why would Stanford University, one of the premier schools in the universe, take a kid who is a screw up in college? Something I learned later on in my career. After leaving Penn, I ended up at Rochester. Then I got a graduate degree at the University of Michigan in human genetics and population planning, taught for a few years in a medical school. Then the guy walked into my office and said, "You need to be at MIT." I ended up at MIT in the Sloan School. And at MIT, Ed, I learned a great lesson that is worth sharing. Great organizations are never afraid to take a chance on you because they don't view your failure as their failure. Lousy organizations view your failure as tainting them, so they're risk adverse. And that goes to the theme that we're talking about. Sometimes you've got to be able to take a chance and do things. I took a chance and applied to a top school. I would add, by the way, in high school, I was my consistency of being a terrible student was there because they threw me out of the academic curriculum, put me in the commercial course where I learned typing, bookkeeping, and clerical practice, and told me I never go to college. Now, for parents out there whose kids are struggling in school, for a kid who's never going to go to college, I have a bachelor's from the University of Pennsylvania, a master's from the University of Rochester, a PhD from the University of Michigan, a master's from MIT, and a law degree from American University. That's not bad for a kid who's not going to go to college.
Yeah. Well, they obviously saw something incredibly special about him.
And I think that that's a great message for people. I think that it's easy to overlook what could be a real talent or a core talent in somebody. And if it's not a core talent that resonates with you, it still may be a core talent. And I think that's part of the issue of my own career is I kind of look at things differently. I'm not afraid to be different. I'm not afraid to do things differently. I'm not afraid to try and experiment. And if it works, I smile. And if it doesn't work, I say, "What the hell happened? Let's see if we can adjust it."
Well, let's shift to the conversation of success. Let's start with, how do you define success today?
That's a wonderful question. And it took me a long time to learn it. But what I learned was success is playing the game to the best of your ability, regardless of whether you win or lose. It isn't the outcome. I kind of had that all along, but one event brought that to my brain in a way that I never could have understood. In the Winter Olympics, like 20, 30 years ago, the American skater, I think it was Scott Hamilton, won the gold medal. And he skated off the ice after his performance. He was frowning. And the reporter said, "Well, Scott, you're going to win the gold medal." And he said, "I didn't skate my best." And I went, wow, that's a very powerful statement. Skating his best, if he didn't win the gold, then somebody skated better. But not skating his best meant I didn't perform to my ultimate ability. And that's, I think, the way I define success. Do you do it to the best of your ability? It also means that I'm learning. Sometimes I learn faster or slower, but I'm always willing to try things. One thing I learned in sports is when you run a play, and when I played baseball, I had a tryout with the Pittsburgh Pirates as a pitcher. I played a lot of pickup sports, but what I loved was pickup football because they always had to be the quarterback. And what I learned was when the play doesn't go right, the first thing you do is figure out what the hell happened that it didn't go the way you wanted? And how do you make an adjustment to make it go better the next time?
Has your definition of success changed over time? And if so, how?
Well, I think in the early days, success was defined by the outcome. Did I win or did I lose? Over time, it evolved to how did I play the game? Did I play to the best of my ability? And then later it was what I told you about Scott Hamilton. If I play at my best and the outcome is still the other guy won, it's because they played better. So success means, have I done the things that I think I can do to the best of my current ability? And if it didn't come out the way I wanted, is there something I could learn to tinker with and improve so that the next time I could try something that could improve it?
So, to frame that just a bit differently, that definition of success includes even if I come out number two, as long as I did my best, I'm still successful.
Yes.
But I can be number one and still in my own mind not be successful because I didn't do everything I knew I could have or should have.
Yes. Yes.
Very
And I
interesting.
think if you watch the great athletes in sports, you can see that mindset. The ones who didn't do as well as they thought they could and still won the game come off the field frowning.
In this journey, what are some of the key challenges that have helped you kind of realize that definition of success?
I think so the biggest challenge, it's a great question. And I think the biggest challenges are not seeing other people's definitions of obstacles and outcomes to define what I do. Again, I go back to applying to school. Why would a kid who's a screw up in high school apply to an Ivy League school and let alone get in? But it's like, okay, I could do that. Why would a kid who is obviously having all sorts of problems as an undergraduate apply to premier schools to go to graduate school? I mean, in the normal realm of thinking, you would never do that. In fact, most people will be told, take 2 years off and go to work for Walmart.
Yeah.
So I think it's really being willing to do something a little different, to have enough faith in myself that I'm willing to try something and not view the outcome today as defining the big outcome. Because if that were the case, I would have stopped with Golden Thread a long time ago, because I have not been able to raise the capital I need to build a prototype. But why would I keep going? Because I know, for reasons that we can talk about, it's the right thing to do at the right time.
And so, if I hear you correctly, part of this really comes down to if this is something has been defined as part of your success, even when you run into obstacles, it's taking that step backwards, figuring out a new path, and continuing that movement forward.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a key element of how I've done things throughout my business and professional life, is being willing to do things differently. I mean, you mentioned my thesis on pregnancies. Nobody in the world thought of doing that work. But let me share another anecdote that says that success is not always something that we control. That sometimes an accident happens.
Yeah.
And here's the accident I'll share. I sent a letter to the Commissioner of Health of New York as a graduate student. Please send me copies of your 1963 and 1965 pregnancy records from New York City so that I can do a mathematical analysis of pregnancy. Now, I didn't know when I wrote the letter that it was illegal for me to get these. So I send a letter to Carl Earhart, who's the commissioner. And you can imagine this guy, he's the commissioner of health. And he gets this letter. And it's like, there's no effing way he gets this. Now, in those days, you never typed your own letters when you were the commissioner, right? So you can imagine him walking out of his office to his secretary and saying, take care of this, throwing it on her desk. She reads the letter and misinterprets his meaning, calls the computer center and said, the commissioner wants you to send this guy the data. I got the data from the computer center. I did my thesis. When I presented my findings that 3 out of 4 pregnancies end in a spontaneous abortion instead of 1 out of 4, in the middle of the paper, the then commissioner, Frida Nelson, in the audience of the American Public Health, stood up and started yelling at me, "How did you get that data? It's illegal."
Oh, my Lord. Now that's an incredible experience. So what happened?
Nothing. She sat down and I finished my paper. There was nothing she could do. I had my PhD. The paper was published, and I didn't use the data to do anything else. I mean, it wasn't like I was trolling. She was so offended by this, but it was a mistake. It was a mistake in my favor. Hey, that's the way the world works sometimes. People on the other end can screw up and do something that can give you an opportunity. And as long as you're not hurting anybody or really doing some damage to somebody, take advantage of the opportunity.
So I mean, your whole work environment focus has a tremendous element of modern thinking, innovation, technology enabled. Talk to me a little bit about what that has meant to your journey and how that's evolved for you.
What it's meant is, and I've been open to listening to what people say and think, and being able to come to aha moments that change my own frame of reference. And an example, my journey into the normal phytogenetics, which is what we're talking about with Golden Thread, began years ago in a meeting with the CEO of a major American company in just before Christmas of 1976. And he gives this talk after lunch, and I get to ask questions. I put my hand up. He calls on me. I stand up. I introduce myself. I'm Dr. Frederic Abramson from Health Management Systems. He said, "Stop right there. Do you know what the problem with the American people is?" And I shook my head, no. He said, "They want to die healthy." And I went, oh my God, that's the home run statement. But here's the thing, Ed, he was CEO of Philip Morris, the cigarette company. And I went, dying healthy is not the same as living well. Why don't we use science and technology to help people live well? Well, a few years later, a guy in California made the same decision about helping people live well. And he said, why should you have to learn about a computer keyboard when you can look at a picture? That was Steve Jobs working with Apple. And then a few years later, Apple was making a device to listen to music. And somebody said, why don't we make a phone out of it?
Yeah.
The thing that Jobs did so well, and there are other guys in the software field, they saw an opportunity to change things that on the whole will make life better for ordinary people. To me, this is the key element in innovation. This is the key element to drive things. Can you make it something people can understand and use without having to become a scientist, without having to get a PhD?
With a specific focus on helping improve the lives of others.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we have a lot of good examples of people who are doing that in technology and in science. And my hat's off to them. And I'm simply taking one more path that is one that isn't something very common right now. But I think that in 10 years, everybody in the world will be thinking of genetics in the absence of disease for their ordinary everyday life, for how they eat, how they sleep, how they interact with people, because our genes are who we are. We're born with them. We're going out of the world with them. Why don't we understand how they're helping drive our life?
I think there's going to be some amazing shifts and changes in the medical field. And there are real indicators that human life will extend to 120 up to 160 years over the next 50 years. So it's not my generation, but maybe my kids will get to enjoy some of that.
Well, I think that things will get better, and we'll find ways to keep us breathing for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But when you think about all of those other entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders that are trying to make a difference, what one or two key takeaways would you offer them to help them through that journey? It's not an easy journey.
I think one is what I suggested earlier. Don't be afraid to do something that's different. And then if it works, keep on the path. And if it doesn't work, let me see if there's something else that I can do. And I think in the world of technology, that's been the thing that defines the companies who continue to evolve and the companies who didn't. And the other is, you have to decide for yourself whether you want to become so wealthy that you don't have to do anything anymore, or make sufficient wealth that you don't have to worry about going to McDonald's on a Saturday night. The latter is in my ballpark. You should be able to not have to worry about paying bills and doing things. But to just make money, to have an extravagant lifestyle, to me, has never been attractive. And when I left MIT, I was offered jobs in New York to work with private equity companies. And I said, all you guys focus on is how much money you can make. What does that have to do with doing anything positive for people?
So that actually ties back to our first question. How do you define success? And so this really encourages people to define their definition of success and make sure they're using that as a filter relative to the decisions and choices they make in their lives and business.
Yes, I thank you for that. That is a great paraphrase. It is a filter. And I would share with them the other filter I use is when you ask me to do something, I only ask myself one question: why not? And if I can't answer it, I say yes. Now, when I interviewed the private equity, the why not was because all they want to do is make money. When decide to go to law school, why not? Well, you have to be at night and you'll be, yeah. I said, yeah, but those aren't good reasons. Why not? Because I don't think the lawyers were doing the job they needed to do to help me. So I might as well learn the law so I could be smarter about the work I do.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that phrase. Why not? What a great filter. Any final takeaways for our audience for this episode?
I think the bottom line is, you highlighted it, is have a sense of what it is really your priorities are. Be consistent with those things, and they can be adjusted over time. They can change the specifics, and understand that the definition of success and failure that the outside world uses is win-lose. And that is a script that you can't live by, because in the big scheme of things, you lose often more than you win in competition. But if you're performing at what is your best and you can still improve and do better, then stay in the game.
Thank you. Words of wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today, and a special thank you to our guest, Frederic Abramson, for sharing his incredible insights and experiences with us. We hope that the conversation has left you inspired and motivated to embrace the challenges of entrepreneurship with resilience, innovation, and adaptability. Remember, success comes in many forms, and it's essential to define it for yourself. Take the lessons shared by Frederic to heart as you navigate your own entrepreneurial journey. Embrace change, seek out opportunities for growth. Be willing to adapt to the ever-evolving landscape of business. Thank you once again to our phenomenal guest speaker, Frederic Abramson, for enlightening us with his wisdom. And thank you all for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next time as we continue exploring the stories behind exceptional entrepreneurs. Stay resilient, stay innovative, anybody.
Thank you, Ed.